Imagine this. You are standing at the edge of your life, looking back at all the patterns you've created, the relationships that somehow always end the same way, the promises you've made to yourself only to break them again and again. You feel trapped in a maze of your own making, desperate to find the exit, yet somehow always returning to the same dead ends. Have you ever wondered why, despite all your knowledge, all your growth, all your determination to change, you still find yourself repeating the same patterns? What invisible force pulls you back into the familiar darkness when all you want is to step into the light? The truth is, most people live their entire lives without ever understanding the prison they've built around themselves. They blame circumstances, other people, bad luck, or fate. They create elaborate stories to explain why things happen to them rather than through them. And in doing so, they surrender the one thing that could truly set them free: radical responsibility. What if I told you that your suffering isn't a mistake in the system, but a feature of it? What if the very thing you're running from is actually the doorway to your liberation? Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what happens when you've been asking all the wrong questions? When your why is nothing but another mask you wear to hide from yourself? Let's begin this journey together, not with comfort, but with truth. The architecture of avoidance. The first uncomfortable truth we must confront is that human beings are masters of avoidance. We don't just avoid pain, we architect entire lives around not feeling it. Think about it. How much of your daily routine is designed not to maximize joy, but to minimize discomfort? The small distractions that fill your day, the scrolling, the noise, the busyness that keeps you from sitting with yourself. Ancient Stoics understood this. Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort, deliberately exposing himself to hunger, cold, and public ridicule to overcome his fear of them. He wasn't a masochist. He was awakening himself from the slumber of comfort. In 1944, during the darkest days of Nazi occupation, Viktor Frankl observed something shocking in the concentration camps. Those who survived weren't necessarily the physically strongest, but those who maintained an inner sense of meaning. They faced the unbearable and remained whole. Have you ever considered that your endless pursuit of comfort might be the very thing making you weak? That your resistance to discomfort has become your greatest limitation? Research from the University of Chicago has shown that our brains are literally wired to avoid uncertainty and emotional discomfort. When faced with ambiguity, the amygdala, our brain's alarm system, activates as strongly as if we were in physical danger. Our bodies cannot distinguish between a difficult conversation and a predator in the wild. Think about that. Your biology is working against your awakening. The path forward isn't through more avoidance, but through what I call conscious confrontation. This is the first principle in our framework. What you refuse to feel controls you. What you choose to feel transforms you. The illusion of the self. The second stage of awakening comes when you realize that the self you've been protecting all these years is largely an illusion. Who are you, really? Are you your thoughts, your emotions, your past, your reputation, your achievements? Eastern philosophies have maintained for thousands of years that the self is not fixed, but fluid. The Buddha taught that we suffer because we cling to a false sense of permanence in an impermanent world. We desperately try to maintain an identity that doesn't actually exist. Consider this. Every 7 years, nearly every cell in your body has been replaced. Physically, you are not the same person you were 7 years ago. And psychologically, the transformation is even more profound. Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert conducted fascinating research on what he calls the end of history illusion. His studies revealed that people of all ages believe they have changed significantly in the past, but will change very little in the future. This is a profound cognitive error. We consistently underestimate how much our preferences, values, and personalities will transform. What does this mean for you? It means that the person you're trying so hard to protect, with all their fears, preferences, and beliefs, is actually a temporary configuration. You're building fortresses around a ghost. Have you ever wondered why you feel so trapped by your own identity? Why breaking out of patterns feels like a betrayal of who you are? The truth is darker, more complex, impossible to ignore. You are not a fixed entity, but a process. Not a noun, but a verb. Not a final product, but an ongoing creation. The anatomy of awareness. Now we arrive at the third principle. Awareness itself is both wound and weapon. Real awareness, not the sanitized version sold in self-help books, is initially painful. When you truly begin to see yourself, you must confront all you've been avoiding. The masks, the manipulations, the ways you've betrayed yourself to please others. Søren Kierkegaard described this as the sickness unto death, the despair that comes from recognizing how far we've strayed from our authentic nature. It is a necessary crucible. In 1957, psychologist Leon Festinger infiltrated a doomsday cult to study what would happen when their prophecy inevitably failed. What he discovered was astonishing. Rather than abandoning their beliefs when the world didn't end as predicted, members became more committed to their delusions, recruiting others with increased fervor. Festinger called this cognitive dissonance, the mental stress we experience when confronted with information that contradicts our existing beliefs. Our minds will perform extraordinary feats of rationalization to protect our worldview. What would you do if you discovered that a fundamental belief you've organized your life around was completely false? Would you have the courage to dismantle it, even if it meant rebuilding yourself from scratch? The anatomy of awareness has 4 chambers, like the human heart. 1. Recognition. Seeing what is actually happening, not what you wish was happening. 2. Responsibility. Acknowledging your role without blame or judgment. 3. Release. Allowing the emotional impact to move through you rather than around you. 4th, reintegration. Incorporating this new understanding into an expanded sense of self. Most people never make it past recognition. The pain is too great, the implications too devastating to their carefully constructed identity. They glimpse the truth and immediately retreat. But here's the paradox. The very awareness that causes pain is also the only thing that can heal it. By fully seeing ourselves, we finally create the possibility of genuine choice. The threshold of transformation. The 4th stage in our framework is what I call the threshold of transformation, the point at which accumulated awareness reaches critical mass. Throughout history, we see this pattern repeated in both individuals and societies. Change doesn't happen gradually, but in sudden, dramatic shifts after long periods of apparent stagnation. Consider the fall of the Berlin Wall. For decades, it stood as an immovable symbol of division. Then, overnight, it was gone. Not because something new had happened, but because the pressure of what had already happened finally broke through. Revolutionary physicist Thomas Kuhn described how scientific progress works this way too, not through steady accumulation of facts, but through paradigm shifts, complete revolutions in thinking that occur when the old framework can no longer accommodate reality. The same applies to personal transformation. You don't change 1% each day in a linear progression. You absorb new awareness until suddenly, everything shifts. Have you been frustrated by your seeming lack of progress despite all your inner work? Have you wondered why, after years of therapy, meditation, or self-improvement, you still find yourself triggering in the same old ways? It's because transformation doesn't work the way you think it does. It's not gradual, it's threshold-based. You're gathering potential energy for a quantum leap. Neuroscience confirms this. Brain scans of people before and after significant life changes show that neural reorganization happens in bursts, not incrementally. New neural pathways strengthen suddenly when the old ones can no longer serve the demands of reality. This is why persistence matters more than perfection. Every moment of awareness, every instance of catching yourself in a pattern, every time you choose differently, even if you fall back, all of it is building toward your threshold. Or the paradox of presence. Now we approach the final and most profound principle, the paradox of presence. True presence, being fully in your life without resistance or attachment, initially increases suffering before it alleviates it. When you stop running, you finally feel the full weight of what you've been running from. This is the central paradox that most spiritual teachings fail to adequately prepare you for. Awakening doesn't immediately feel good. It often feels like dying because, in a way, it is the death of the false self you've constructed. Simone Weil, the French philosopher who experienced profound mystical states amid terrible physical suffering, wrote, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." She understood that to truly pay attention to yourself, to others, to reality itself, is both a gift and a sacrifice. Historical examples abound. Gandhi's non-violent resistance wasn't passive. It required facing violence with open eyes. Nelson Mandela emerged from 27 years of imprisonment not broken, but expanded in his capacity to embrace complexity. They didn't transcend suffering, they transformed through it. When researchers at MIT studied long-term meditators, they discovered something unexpected. During the early years of practice, participants actually reported more sensitivity to pain and emotional distress, not less. It was only after passing through this period of heightened awareness that they developed the equanimity meditation is known for. What would happen if, instead of asking, "How can I feel better?" you asked, "How can I see more clearly?" even if what you see causes temporary pain? The paradox is this. Presence both wounds and heals. It shows you everything you've been avoiding, and it gives you the capacity to hold it all. The same light that exposes your darkness becomes the light that transforms it. So where does this leave you, standing at the edge of your life, looking back at those patterns that have defined you? It leaves you with a choice, not between pain and no pain. That's the false choice that kept you stuck. The real choice is between unconscious suffering and conscious suffering. Between being controlled by what you refuse to see, or being transformed by what you have the courage to face. Integration. The way forward. As we conclude this exploration, let me offer you a framework for integrating these principles into your daily existence, not as abstract philosophy, but as lived practice. First, create deliberate moments of stillness, not comfortable meditation where you float above your life, but radical presence where you sink into it. 5 minutes of truly feeling your body, your emotions, your thoughts without judgment or escape. Can you sit with yourself without reaching for your phone, without distracting yourself, without narratizing? Second, practice what psychologists call cognitive diffusion, the ability to observe your thoughts rather than becoming them. When you think, "I'm not good enough," can you notice, I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough? This small shift creates vital space between you and the thought patterns that have defined you. Third, seek discomfort strategically. Identify one small area where you habitually avoid challenge and deliberately engage it. This isn't about torture. It's about expanding your capacity to be with difficult experiences without contracting. Fourth, develop unconditional self-observation. This means watching yourself with the same curiosity and compassion you would offer a child learning to walk. When you fail, when you fall back into old patterns, can you watch this happen without adding the secondary suffering of self-judgment? And finally, surround yourself with truth-tellers, people who are committed to their own awakening and who will reflect reality back to you, not just what you want to hear. True connection requires authenticity, and authenticity requires courage on both sides. The journey from unconscious to conscious living isn't comfortable, but it is magnificent. It transforms suffering from something that happens to you into something that happens for you, a catalyst for your evolution rather than an obstacle to your happiness. Remember this: the pain you feel when truly seeing yourself isn't the pain of awakening. It's the pain that was always there, finally given the space to be acknowledged. And in that acknowledgement lies the beginning of its transformation. What matters isn't that you never fall, but that you fall awake. Not that you never suffer, but that your suffering becomes conscious, purposeful, transformative. So I leave you with this question that only you can answer. Are you willing to feel everything in order to become whole? Are you brave enough to stand in the fire of your own awareness, knowing that what burns away was never truly you? The choice, as always, remains yours.